grow 500% more vegetables in 5 times less space. Really? I mean, okay, come on. Really? 500% more vegetables in 5 times less space. Yeah. Yeah, yes, Starry says yes, it can be done. And you came to the right place, because on this homestead, the proof really is in the pudding. And I am going to talk about not just those numbers, but I tell you what, when I started looking at our square footage, and I started looking at our output and our yield and our production here in our garden, oh, we blow those numbers away. And it's easy to blow those numbers away because of the gardening method that we chose. See, food production, growing food, is a livelihood. We depend on this. So our whole self-sustainability really relies on a lot of produce, which means high yield in little space. We may have 13 acres here off the grid, but it's not 13 usable acres. And if you've seen any of our videos, you have seen that we have an edible forest on the very small percentage of land that we are able to grow food. And we have successfully done it so that we stay self-sustainable and independent, and I've got a great big pantry to prove it. A couple different, it's like a recipe, a couple different things here that get us that high yield in that very limited space. And I'm really excited about sharing it with you, but I want to show you real quickly what I'm talking about so you can wrap your brain around this. So let's go on a little garden tour. Just take a little close-up real quick. I've got pole beans coming up next to flowers and next to beets, and peas are over here, and there's even strawberries in there. Now, when we talk about the proof is in the pudding, I really want you to look closely at our garden. Look, things are very close together, kind of packed. I have got garlic with celery and tomatoes and cabbage right next to each other. I've got carrots sprouting in between onions. Now, you saw the hodgepodge, and that's what it is. It's like a hodgepodge. You're looking at it and saying, Starry, man, you've got plants, all different types of vegetable plants, and they're all smashed together, and you got tomato, and then you got lettuce in there, and then you got kale in there, and garlic. How can stuff grow so close like that and be productive? Well, that's the key. That is the key. That is when you have to start thinking outside the box, and not only do you need to get rid of the borders and go borderless, but you got to get rid of the rows. You got to get rid of the rulers. And that's what we're going to talk about, because if you are looking to increase your yield, you have to do 2 things. Number 1, you see our garden? You see the wood chips? Back to Eden gardening. Now, you've heard it here before, and I am going to do another shout out for Back to Eden gardening. This method, hands down, is the most sustainable method out there if you want to be a serious gardener and feed your family. Feed your family with minimal effort. If you live in an area where water is a problem, back to Eden. If you live in an area where pests are a problem, back to Eden. If you live in an area where you have poor soil, back to Eden. We have done our research, and this is going into 5 years now. We're going to be going then into the 6th year, and this method has given us outstanding, sustainable soil, has saved it on watering, weeding, not an issue, pest control, not an issue, and we have such an extended growing season now with the Back to Eden garden method. It's phenomenal. You know, when the rest of the valley is done with their garden, we're into October, November, we're still pulling produce out of our garden. It is a recipe that is very specific. Very specific. It's not a little of this and it's not a little of that. And people are failing with the Back to Eden garden method because there's too much information out there and too much misinformation out there. You want the proof that's in the pudding, come to the places where people are doing it successfully for a sustained period of time, because our livelihood, you know, we need to feed ourselves here. And we have done it, and I tell you, we've got the method down. But it is a special recipe, and you gotta follow it. You don't follow it right, you're not going to have the results. So that's number one. Number two, you saw the hodgepodge, right? You saw all of the, here we got cabbage, we got a potato plant, we've got broccoli, we've got flowers, we've got celery over there, we've got stuff growing in between. Now what is up with that? What's up with that is part of that going borderless and really just making the most out of the space that you have. And I didn't know, the Starry didn't know this. Apparently there is a special name for what we do here. And you know how we got to this point was when we implemented the Back to Eden garden method. It was so successful the first year. Our garden was busting out of the seams, and we actually had raised beds. What a waste. It was such a waste because we started looking at these raised beds, these garden beds, and we thought, we can't contain this garden. This garden wants to grow, and the soil is like growing too. And why would we contain it in a garden bed? And besides, we're wasting more space. We're wasting, every square inch will feed an extra mouth. So why are we containing gardens in beds and then walking around? We started planting very close together, and we started mixing things up. So next to the cabbage went the celery, and then we slid in some radishes, and then if we had some extra room, we put in some carrots. And the whole garden, like the earth floor, became a garden. And what that is actually called is high intensity gardening. I didn't know. It's been around for a long time, and people have been doing it, but they've been doing it specifically only in garden beds. Why? Why only in a raised bed? This method works so well with the Back to Eden. Now, the great thing about using this type of gardening method, the Back to Eden gardening method, and high intensity gardening method is a couple things. Number one, you're going to increase your yield, hands down. Number two, it's not going to be as labor intense. Where can you implement a garden method and get 1,000 times more percent out of your produce with less effort? Who wouldn't want that, right? Who wouldn't want that? And it's amazing that that's what we have been doing here year after year after year in this homestead without really knowing the proper verbiage. Who would have known that that's what we were doing? We came up with that on our own. Why? Because it worked. So there really was proof in the pudding because this homestead relies on that. So here, real quickly now, how can you start a biointensive garden right now? Now, it's already June, we're going into July. Is it too late? It's not too late. And this is a great thing about implementing this garden method and seeing those yields already increase because we got a whole gardening season. We got a whole gardening season, and you could already increase your yield by doing this. I'm going to show you. Look at the areas that you already have food growing, and then ask yourself, could I plant something between the rows? Is there a dead space in my garden? And you know what? If you're using any type of conventional method, you probably have a lot of dead spaces. You would be surprised how many dead spaces you have. In fact, Starry found a dead space, which is really unusual, but I look for dead spaces all the time. I'll go out in my garden daily and look for dead spaces. When I find a space, I'm planting. Now, carrots, especially, and there's some other produce too, we do a lot of succession planting, which means we plant throughout the season so that we can harvest throughout the season. And that's another method that we implement. So here is a dead space. Look at that. This is a beautiful dead space. Why it's here, I don't know. It's a dead space. Starry, you're bad. But it's not a dead space any longer. So what you do is you find that dead space and you plant your seeds or your produce. Now, I have a batch of carrots that I just planted 2 weeks ago. Now, this batch is coming up. So I planted another batch right here. And I just intermingled it among the sunflower, among the broccoli, and among the cabbage. Those carrots will come up. So this patch will be harvested a couple weeks later. Then this patch will be harvested later. But that's what you do. Don't be afraid to plant close together. That produce is going to, they're not going to choke each other out. Trust me, and especially if you use the back to Eden garden method. Radishes, you've got carrots, whatever it is, you just throw it out there in that dead spot, right next to whatever is growing. Don't be afraid. Do not be afraid. Get rid of the rulers and get rid of the old mentality where you take each seed and you plant it, Don't worry about that. Trust me. And when it comes to thinning, you'll say, well, Starry, are you going to thin your carrots then? And do you thin your radishes? I thin nothing. Zero. Just simply because I allow nature to do what it's supposed to do. The strong will survive. The weak will wilt. And that's what happens in my garden. That's why I chose the Back to Eden garden method. Because it does my work for me. It really does. And the high intensity gardening method being implemented with the Back to Eden garden too. I'm not pulling weeds. There's no weeds to pull. Sorry, there just isn't. And less watering, and there's no pest. So just remember, you get those seeds and start going in between wherever you see that dead space, and do it now. You want high yield, you're going to get high yield. Now, do you have to do both methods? You don't have to, because there's already proof that the high intensity method, even in a raised bed, does work. It's effective, and you're going to get more produce, yes. But why would you, after watching this video, not implement a Back to Eden garden? When it doubles and triples and quadruples your yield, right? If you have access to wood chips and you can get them, start. You may not do it this year, but now you know for next year, right? That both work hands down better than just one. Better than just one. So instead of doing just one method, why wouldn't you do both methods? If you have access, obviously, to wood chips, and you can start that recipe. All right, cool stuff, right? I mean, there's proof in this pudding right here. And I love to pass it on to you, friends, because I want you to grow your food and get a lot. I want you to save money. I want you to feed your family. That's what I want you to succeed. So we're offering you the best method that has helped us be successful. And, I love it when people implement these things and yes, it works. You're like, you were right, it worked. I can't believe that I got more produce. Pretty cool. Both those methods. Pow, whammo. You're not going to be sorry, and you're going to have so much produce, you're not going to know what to do with it. All right, friends, God bless, and keep coming back, because we've got a lot more gardening videos for you, because Starry's, wow, we just have a lot. Let's just put it that way. Okay, God bless, friends.